Welcome to the channel, everyone. My name is Nick. For those that are new to the channel, hopefully by the end of this video, you do become a subscriber. So recently, there's been a lot of talk about Mark Carney. So for those that actually don't know, he was the governor of the Bank of Canada, and we actually have that here from February 1st of 2008 all the way up to about June 1st of 2013. Then he became governor of the Bank of England from July 1st of 2013 to March 15th of 2020. Now, from finance law, we have this is like Jerome Powell becoming the unelected president of the United States in 2026. Now, this is something that a lot of people are now talking about in a big way because recently there's been a lot of clips actually resurfacing around Mark Carney, even in the XRP community. I mean, listen, if you do hold XRP, you actually probably know about Mark Carney at this point because of what he was talking about back in like 2018, 2019, all the way up until about 2020. And also, you probably already know about all of the connections between Bank of England and also Ripple. And if you guys don't know, I actually did a complete breakdown between Ripple and the Bank of England and with their POC from about 6 years ago. It's a massive rabbit hole. I think that if you do have X, if you have an account over on X, you should go check this out. It's in my highlights. It's not too far down, but I do completely break down all of the connections between Ripple, CBDCs, XRP, using XRP, even documents from the FSB with the IMF, the BIS. I mean, there's so much information here, but this is why, now with all of the news, surfacing around Mark Carney, everyone's talking a little bit about, is now the time that we're about to witness a big shift in finance? Because right now we have a lot of threats coming from Canada with, the US around tariffs, and the tariff war continues to really kind of break out, which is basically just geopolitical conflict and a trade war. Over here, we have some of those older clips, and this actually got posted by Subjective Views, and we have how many remember when Mark Carney, former Bank of England governor and now slated to be Prime Minister of Canada, said this: in a multipolar world, you need a multipolar currency. Things don't just happen, they're made to happen. Check it out.
So what's the point?
Give us the thumbnail. Why can't the dollar be the global currency?
Okay, the dollar is the global currency. We know that. The challenge is that the U.S. share of the global economy has been reducing. The dollar's share of payments, not just financial assets, but payments, a lot of payments between countries that have nothing to do with the U.S. are in dollars. And what happens in situations like we're in today, where the U.S. economy, to its credit, is relatively strong, is doing better, and the Fed has been doing the right thing, which is, they've adjusted policy, they tightened policy as it was strengthening. Now they're making, the Fed is doing the right thing, but they have adjusted and policy is relatively strong. That means rest of world policy is tighter than it needs to be, and that feeds back on the U.S. economy in a way that ultimately slows this economy, and it leads to a substandard outcome. And in a world where you only have limited policy space, it's a dangerous place to be. And so the trade issues we're talking about are reinforced by the structure of the monetary system. Now, I mean, you've asked a big question, so just give me a second to, but now the issue is, you don't just jump to something new overnight. And what we want in a multipolar world, I think we'd agree that we've got European engine, we've got the Chinese engine, we've got the US engine of this economy. Multipolar world, you need a multipolar currency. The question is, how do you get there? And I laid out some ideas of how you would get there.
And the bottom line, Governor, is that all of the pressure on the difference in growth around the world would not fall on the dollar exchange rate. Yeah. It would be spread out if it was a global basket of currencies.
It would be spread out as a global basket of currencies. It's better for the system as a whole. It's better. It raises that equilibrium level of interest rates.
Right.
It gives central banks more policy, but it gives people who are watching greater returns on their savings.
Well, certainly we're.
Now, on top of this, if we go over here, we have Mark Carney to replace Justin Trudeau as Canada's Prime Minister. This got announced right over the weekend. And what's kind of crazy about this is he's calling for a multipolar world, multipolar currency as well. And if we think about what's been happening ever since going all the way back to March of 2022. So just for reference, if you guys haven't been keeping up with the videos, it's all right. You don't have to. I'm not asking you to. But one thing that I have been talking about ever since 2022, specifically March, is when we announced sanctions against Russia. The next day, literally 24 hours later, what did we, push in the US? Biden signed an executive order. It was 14067. And in that executive order, it talked about CBDCs. It talked about digital technology. Why? Because the BRICS, that does include, Russia, they have been calling for a multipolar currency. They actually called for a multipolar world order as well. They've also been pushing back against the dollar. They've also been utilizing digital currencies. They've been using digital technology. We even know that Russia has been pushing their CBDC. We know China already has their CBDC. We know a lot of the nations tied to the BRICS that even have potential partnerships with the BRICS have also been pushing CBDCs. 93% of the central banks in the world have been pushing for a CBDC. And even the ECB has also been pushing for a central bank currency. When we look at this, here we have from subjective views as well. New ECB President Christine Lagarde says that a wholesale and retail digital euros, aka central bank digital currency, will launch in October of this year. We are talking about 7 months away. This is a very big announcement. Check this out.
On your second point, I tend to share your views. Nature doesn't like vacuum. And we started working on the digital euro way back. Actually, when I started my term 5.5 years ago. And I'm not claiming, parentality on the digital euro, because my colleague Benoît Cœuré had already committed a speech on this matter before I arrived. But I certainly carried on with that project, and subsequently Fabio Panetta on the board and then Piero Cipollone, who has replaced Fabio, have taken the lead together with a very, very good team which is focused on accelerating the pace and hopefully campaigning enough with all the stakeholders, meaning European Parliament, meaning European Council, meaning European Commission, so that we can eventually, not put to bed, but put to reality this digital euro. The deadline for us is going to be October of 25, and we are getting ready for that deadline, but we will not be able to move unless the other parties, the stakeholders, as I call them, Commission, Council, and Parliament, actually complete the legislative process, without which we will not be able to move. And I think it is critically important, and it seems to the agnostic or the skeptics, it seems to be more relevant and more of an imperative now than ever before, both on the wholesale and on the retail level, both.
Now, of course, there could be delays around this because, just like she said, there has to be some legal frameworks within this as well. They have to get through a few, different processes. But think about what we just heard over here from Mark Carney, and this goes back a while ago. This is like I want to say this is like around 2019, 2020. What he is saying here is that we'll basically have this basket of currencies. There was a great post back in 2020 that actually highlighted XRP. It highlighted XRP as a bridge currency between all of these different CBDCs that would also be tied back in an SDR to gold. Right now, central banks are stockpiling massive amounts of gold. They continue to buy gold, and they continue to push a CBDC. In my opinion, when we think about a gold-backed system that has CBDCs within it, issued out on private ledger technology, public ledger technology, it doesn't matter. They would still need a bridge. They would still need that neutral bridge currency. We always look at that as a multipolar currency. In this case, it could definitely be XRP. Obviously, I'm not going to, say for 100% certain that it is. In my opinion, I think that there's a high probability that XRP would be that currency, because think about who has been meeting with all of these big players, even, of course, Christine Lagarde. It's Brad Garlinghouse. We know Brad Garlinghouse was at a lot of private meetings during 2018, 2019. You got to remember that Ripple swell, the first one, was just all big bankers. It was, major bankers, massive financial organizations, like even the IMF were there. And this is a blockchain based company. And this is before crypto was even on center stage. So it just kind of makes sense to have, potentially XRP be that bridge currency. But also remember that even from the ECB themselves, back in the end of February, they put out Eurosystem Expands Initiative to settle DLT-based transactions in central bank money. So this would be, central bank digital currencies, recorded and settled on distributed ledger technology. This is kind of crazy when you think about it, because again, this is something that we've been talking about for years happening. And, now the ECB seems to be accelerating everything. We're starting to see a big push on, CBDCs being launched by, October of this year. We don't know if that's going to be, set in stone, because there, could be things that change, but it feels as if they are trying to really kind of accelerate this in a big way. Mark Carney recently did talk about the tariffs on the US. We also know that, Donald Trump has been very adamant about, continuing to push tariffs. I feel like that's just one big accelerant as well to push back against the dollar from all of these other nations. We're starting to see a big trade war kind of blow up a little bit. But remember what this will all lead to, right? It will lead to that conflict where it becomes a huge event that is not the actual big finale. The finale is what happens after, which is, an implosion, if you will, around the current financial system to usher in the new. I do think that that's kind of where we're headed. I mean, even right now, if you really look at stocks, you look at the economic outlook, it's not that bullish. It really isn't. I've been saying many times on this channel that I'm very bullish on crypto for the rest of this year. But after that, I do think that we are kind of getting into a dangerous zone, especially around a possible recession or a significant crash like 2008. But I think that that's exactly what they want. And I think that it is to introduce a stablecoin or a CBDC within the US. We know that back in the middle of January, sort of the end of January, we have an executive order from Trump banning the creation of a CBDC. The issue here is it kind of goes all the way back to, roughly May, where we did hear from Congress how they wanted to block a CBDC, and we actually have several states take steps to block a central bank digital currency. And even back then, I was very adamant about how everyone is screaming the US ban the CBDC, but they actually don't define what a CBDC actually is. I said that the definition is so vague, and while everyone is celebrating stablecoins, remember that they could easily be programmed like CBDCs. Focus on the facts and pay attention to the details, because even here, the problem is that they don't define a CBDC. How do you block something that you can't define? People criticize me for emphasizing the plumbing. They say it doesn't matter. Here's a perfect example of why it matters far more than most realize. And even, January, I said, well, is he going to just ban the term CBDC, or will he ban the creation of a digital equivalence of the US dollar? Because even now, if we go back over here to this video just recently, the CBDC is here and it's called stablecoins. There is no difference between the two, and here at the Crypto Summit in the White House, they openly admit their plan. We plan to use stablecoins to keep the dollar the reserve currency. Check it out.
We are going to keep the U.S. the dominant reserve currency in the world, and we
there you have it, right? And they're going to do this using stablecoins.
Use stablecoins to do that.
So there you have it. And what's crazy about this is, think about it. This got announced at a crypto summit in the US. This is weeks after the ECB said that they're planning and expanding initiatives to settle DLT-based transactions in central bank money, aka CBDCs. A digital euro is going to be a stablecoin, but this is basically what a CBDC actually is. All of this is in line with what we've been talking about for years around crypto. We know that there's a bigger plan in place here for DLT, for crypto, for even XRP and Ripple. Because again, I know that a lot of people kind of get annoyed with the whole idea of oh, it's only Ripple and it's only XRP. It's not the fact that it's only Ripple and it's only XRP. It's the fact that You know, Ripple and XRP are always brought up in every single document. That's why I wanted to bring up the fact that, like, I did a complete breakdown of all of the connections back to Bank of England and Ripple and even XRP, because this is over 6 years ago. And almost every single one of these documents talks about Ripple, talks about XRP. I mean, I'm talking about specifically mentioning Ripple and XRP as well. And I just find it crazy. I find it crazy that they were being talked about this heavily 6 years ago, and they still are today. So if that doesn't tell us that Ripple is one of those chosen companies from the space to actually be working with the biggest elite players, remember, Ripple is a blockchain-based company that has been holding banking conferences for years. I don't know what it does tell you. And again, with XRP, we know that there's so many connections back to XRP with Bank of, America. You have all these major banks as well. We even have banks launching stablecoins on the XRP ledger, like, Societe Generale. There's also BBVA. I mean, guys, the overall list here of connections is just so immense, which is why I'm still so heavily fixated on Ripple and XRP to this day. So with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys definitely leave a like, subscribe, turn notifications on because more free content. You guys are more than welcome to follow me on Twitter and join the free Discord down in the description below. And with that being said, guys, it's been Nick. Thanks for watching. Peace out.